Before beginning a detailed reconstruction of the events of August 19, 1941, the channel administration asks you to subscribe and leave a comment under this material. Your engagement directly helps the development of the project and allows us to continue archival research based exclusively on documents, figures, and verified facts of military history. In the Central Archive of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, in the collection of the Southern Front Headquarters, Operational Report number 0142 from August 19, 1941, is stored. The text of the document is recorded in pencil on standard sheets of gray size 4 paper. The dispatch timeline indicates 0 hours 45 minutes. According to the document, at 17 hours 30 minutes on August 18, 1941, forces of the engineering units of the People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs carried out the demolition of the piers and the sluice section of the dam of the Dnieper Hydroelectric Power Station named after Lenin, near the city of Zaporizhzhia. As a result of the explosion, a breach 135 meters long was created in the body of the concrete structure. The shock wave and water flow destroyed the turbines of the machine hall, the switchgear, and the power lines. The engineering structure completely ceased electricity generation and lost its functionality as a transport bridge across the Dnieper River. This document is the starting point for a technical analysis of the operation, which was planned under conditions of deep secrecy. To understand the prerequisites for this engineering demolition, it is necessary to conduct an audit of the military, technical, and strategic situation on the southern flank of the Soviet-German front by mid-August 1941. The Dnieper Hydroelectric Power Station was the largest energy hub in the south of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. As of 1940, the station generated over 2 billion kilowatt-hours of electricity per year, powering the Zaporizhzhia metallurgical plant, the coke and chemical plant, special engineering factories, and the aluminum plant. From a military point of view, the dam was a concreted transport artery 760 meters long and 60 meters high. A 2-lane highway was laid along the top of the dam, capable of withstanding loads of up to 30 tons, which allowed for the movement of medium tanks, heavy artillery, and motor vehicles. By August 10, 1941, the troops of the 1st Panzer Group under the command of Colonel General Ewald von Kleist had broken through the defenses at the junction of the 6th and 12th Armies of the Southwestern Front. This created a direct threat of a deep encirclement of the left flank of the Southern Front under the command of Army General Ivan Tulinev. The speed of advance of the forward units of the 14th Motorized Corps of the Wehrmacht reached 40 kilometers per day. The main supply line for Soviet troops in the Dnieper Bend relied on railway and road bridges in the areas of Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia. The total mobilization and personnel strength of the Southern Front forces pressed against the right bank of the Dnieper amounted to over 180,000 men, 340 tanks of various types, and about 2,000 guns and mortars. At the same time, the density of anti-tank defense on the threatened directions did not exceed 4 guns per kilometer of front. Here we find the first serious discrepancy between archival sources and the command's plans. The Military Engineering Directorate of the Southern Front, in reports dated the 12th of August, assessed the carrying capacity of the dirt roads on the river's right bank at 800 vehicles per day. At the same time, the actual traffic intensity of the retreating columns exceeded 2,000 units of wheeled and tracked vehicles, which led to the formation of traffic jams up to 15 kilometers long on the approaches to the crossings. The evacuation plan for the material assets of the Zaporizhzhia industrial hub, approved by the State Defense Committee, envisioned the removal of equipment from 22 large defense plants. The implementation of this task required 45,000 railway wagons. By the 15th of August, less than 11,000 wagons had been dispatched. The shortage of rolling stock forced the command to decide to destroy the remaining facilities on site. Special measures for preparing the destruction of the Dnieper Hydroelectric Station began in the first days of August 1941. Overall command of the operation was entrusted to the Chief of Engineers of the Southern Front, Colonel Alexander Shifrinets, and the General Staff Representative, Military Engineer First Rank Boris Ipov. For the detonation, 20 tons of explosives of the aminal and pressed TNT types were delivered from Moscow by a special transport aircraft flight. The placement of the charges was carried out by the forces of the 157th Separate Engineer Battalion of the People's Commissariat of Internal Affairs. The technical detonation scheme envisaged placing the explosives in the dam's inspection galleries, internal service galleries, at a depth of 12 meters below the upper pool water level. The total weight of the main charge, placed in piers 49 through 56, was 11,000 kilograms. An additional charge of 9,000 kilograms was placed in the area of the forebay to guarantee the destruction of the generator units. The chronicle of the 19th of August requires second-by-second accuracy, as recorded in combat logs. At 0 hours 30 minutes, the forward detachments of the 9th Panzer Division of the Wehrmacht, part of the 14th Motorized Corps, reached the approaches to the right bank part of Zaporizhzhia. At their disposal were 42 light and medium tanks, as well as 2 motorized infantry companies on armored personnel carriers. The main forces of the Soviet 12th Army at this time continued their crossing to the left bank of the Dnieper. Communication between the headquarters of the Southern Front, located in Zaporizhzhia, and the command of the 12th Army was disrupted due to artillery fire from the enemy at 3 o'clock in the morning. Wire communication lines were cut, and 5 AK-type radio stations did not provide stable reception due to the terrain. At 8 o'clock in the morning on the 18th of August, German forward units occupied the right bank part of the city and reached the dam directly. The defense of this sector was held by units of the 31st Division of the People's Commissariat of Internal Affairs for the protection of particularly important industrial enterprises, and separate companies of the 274th Rifle Division. The total strength of the defenders on the right flank was less than 2,400 men, armed only with small arms and 12 45mm anti-tank guns. German artillery deployed batteries of 150mm heavy field howitzers on the heights of the right bank and began direct fire on the dam structure and the administrative buildings of the hydroelectric power station management. At 1500 hours, the situation became critical. German motorized infantry attempted a breakthrough along the highway surface of the dam using armored vehicles. The fire from the Soviet coastal batteries failed to suppress the enemy's artillery positions. At 1630 hours, Boris Ipov received a verbal directive from a member of the Military Council of the Southern Front, transmitted via the cipher service line of the People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs. The order instructed him to immediately activate the explosive devices if holding the objective became impossible. At this point, a second key contradiction arises. The post-war memoirs of Army General Tyulenev claim that the command to detonate was not issued by the front's headquarters, but was an initiative of local operatives from the state security organs. However, archival documents attest to the existence of a direct directive, coordinated with the General Staff in Moscow 3 days prior to the event. At 1730 minutes, the circuit of electric detonators was closed. 20 tons of ammonal detonated. The force of the explosion caused the immediate destruction of the dam's support structures. The water pressure in the upper pool at the moment of the explosion was 51 meters. A hydrodynamic wave formed, reaching a height of 22 meters in the breach area. The speed of the water flow in the first 30 minutes after the breach was 38 kilometers per hour. The total volume of water released in the first 3 hours is estimated at 130 million cubic meters. The water flow rushed down the Dnieper riverbed, flooding the river's floodplain, islands, and coastal settlements to a depth of up to 12 kilometers. An analysis of the consequences of this operation requires an examination of the movement of the water masses and the disposition of the troops. Downstream, in the floodplains and on the islands, were units of the 9th and 18th Soviet armies, which were completing a withdrawal maneuver. Due to a lack of coordination and the secrecy of the demolition preparations, the headquarters of these armies were not notified of the timing of the action. The divisional radio stations received no warning signals. The wave hit the shoreline 1 hour and 40 minutes after the explosion in the Khortytsia area. Supply trains, ammunition depots, artillery positions, and field hospitals were caught in the inundation zone. The rate of water rise in the Nikopol area was 4 meters over 2 hours. The troops lost the ability to use the assembled pontoon crossings. 3 pontoon bridges were torn from their mooring anchors and swept away by the current. Here, it is necessary to conduct a critical audit of the command's decisions, based on the 1938 Infantry Combat Manual and the Engineer Troops Manual. The engineering support for the withdrawal of large troop formations requires the mandatory creation of safety zones and redundant communication channels. Not one of these requirements was fully met. The front command overestimated the stability of the right bank bridgehead's defense and underestimated the speed of the enemy's mobile group concentration. As a result, the demolition of the dam, intended to halt the German advance, inflicted damage on our own logistical chains. The 12th Army found itself cut off from its supply bases on the left bank, losing up to 40% of its materiel, including heavy artillery and motor transport, which had to be abandoned on the right bank or scuttled in the river due to the impossibility of crossing. The losses among the personnel of the Soviet troops as a result of the hydrodynamic shock remain subject to verification, according to the reports of irretrievable losses. The operational reports of the 9th Army for August 20th record that the 30th Cavalry Regiment and 2 companies of the 9th Engineer Battalion lost contact with headquarters and are listed as missing in the Dnieper floodplains. The total number of servicemen who lost their lives or were incapacitated due to the flooding is estimated by historians based on an analysis of personnel lists to be between 2,000 and 3,000 people. German losses from the dam's destruction were minimal. The forward detachments of the 9th Panzer Division of the Wehrmacht lost 2 armored personnel carriers and about 15 men incapacitated, as their main forces had not yet begun to cross the Dnieper in that area and were positioned on the commanding heights. The third major planning error was the incorrect assessment of the hydrological effect. Engineers' calculations assumed that creating the flood zone would block the actions of German troops on the left bank for at least 25 days. In reality, due to the rapid drop in water level after the passage of the main surge, the Dnieper riverbed above the dam became shallow. The water level in the reservoir dropped by 12 meters. This facilitated the enemy's subsequent crossing of the river in areas northwest of Zaporizhzhia. In early September 1941, units of the 11th Army of the Wehrmacht were able to cross the shallowed Dnieper riverbed by boat and pontoon, establishing a bridgehead on the left bank in the Kakhovka area. Thus, the long-term defensive line the General Staff had counted on did not materialize. Let us consider the logistical consequences of the destruction of the Dnieper Hydroelectric Station for the industrial potential of the sides. Taking the station out of commission halted the work of the entire industrial complex of Zaporizhzhia, Dnipropetrovsk, and Kryvyi Rih. The cessation of electricity supply stopped the electric furnaces of the Dnipropetrovsk plant, which produced high-alloy steel for the aviation and tank industries. Machinery and equipment that could not be dismantled in time were rendered unusable by being filled with concrete or by the demolition of key components. The German administration, after occupying Zaporizhzhia, spent 2 years trying to restore power generation. For this purpose, new turbines manufactured by Siemens were delivered from Germany. By the summer of 1943, they had managed to start only one generator of minimal capacity, which covered only the internal needs of the occupation garrison. From the perspective of changing the operational tactical situation, the destruction of the dam allowed the units of the Southern Front to gain time to regroup troops directly within the city limits of Zaporizhzhia. The defense of the left bank part of the city by rifle units and militia detachments continued until October 1941. During this period, the evacuation of equipment from the Zaporizhzhia plant was completed. More than 2,000 unique machine tools and rolling mills were dismantled and removed to the rear areas of the Urals and Siberia, where production of armor steel for T-34 tanks was established based on them. This material factor became the main argument of the supporters of the expediency of carrying out this engineering operation. The dry summary of the destruction of the Dnieper Hydroelectric Station shows that the decision was a forced technical action, taken under conditions of a lack of reliable intelligence data on enemy forces and a loss of troop control. The operation solved the short-term task of preventing the capture of the bridge by the Wehrmacht's forward tank units, but simultaneously disorganized the logistics of the Southern Front's left flank and damaged the region's civilian infrastructure. The loss of this energy giant slowed the output of industrial production in the south of the country, forcing the relocation of production facilities under the extreme conditions of the autumn of 1941. The demolition of the Dnieper Hydroelectric Station entered history as an example of harsh military necessity, where the price of a tactical gain in time was measured by the destruction of one's own state's material technical base and human resources. Moving to a detailed consideration of topographical factors, it is necessary to point out the profile of the Dnieper riverbed in the Zaporizhzhia area. The river's right bank has a height of up to 35 meters above sea level, while the left bank is a low-lying plain with a predominance of sandy and loamy soils. When the dam was destroyed, the main vector of the hydraulic shock was directed at the left bank floodplain. According to maps from the General Staff of the Workers' and Peasants' Red Army, edition of 1939, within direct line of sight from the dam were the settlements of Kichkas and Einlage, as well as numerous agricultural collectives. The total area of land subjected to immediate flooding within the first 24 hours was 48 square kilometers. The residents of these settlements did not receive timely evacuation orders, as the order for demolition was received via special communication channels 30 minutes before detonation. The supply of the 12th Army's troops in the period from the 19th to the 25th of August, 1941, was carried out under conditions of complete isolation from Central Front depots. The loss of the automobile bridge on the dam forced engineering services to deploy boat crossings. The throughput capacity of one such crossing was only 40 tons of cargo per hour, which satisfied the needs of a rifle division by merely 15% of the standard supply norm. The deficit of 122mm artillery shells by the 22nd of August reached a critical mark of 0.2 of a standard ammunition load per gun. The troops were forced to conserve ammunition, firing only at attacking enemy tanks, which reduced the overall effectiveness of defensive actions on the left bank. An additional archival document, discovered in the materials of the Southern Front's Military Sanitary Directorate, contains a report on the sanitary epidemiological situation in the lower reaches of the Dnieper in September 1941. The flooding of floodplain lands led to the formation of numerous foci of standing water, which, under conditions of high air temperature, created a threat of a typhoid fever outbreak. Engineering units were forced to divert 3 separate sapper battalions to conduct disinfection and collect the bodies of fallen servicemen and civilians, washed ashore by the current. In total, in the sector of responsibility of the 18th Army by the 10th of September, over 1,200 bodies were recorded and interred, confirming the massive impact of the water element on the coastal strip. An analysis of the German command's actions shows that the destruction of the dam only partially adjusted their plans. Colonel General von Kleist, having noted the impossibility of using the Dnieper as a bridge, redirected the forces of the 14th Motorized Corps northward, towards Dnipropetrovsk. The German Air Force, represented by the 4th Air Fleet of the Luftwaffe, shifted its strikes from the Zaporizhzhia direction to the crossing areas near Kremenchuk. This proves that the strategic initiative remained in the hands of the enemy, who possessed high mobility and could promptly change the directions of main attacks, bypassing the destroyed engineering nodes of the Soviet defense. Considering the technical side of the dam's restoration by Soviet troops after the liberation of Zaporizhzhia in 1943, one can assess the scale of the destruction of 41. To eliminate the breach and restore the energy circuit, it was necessary to lay more than 60,000 cubic meters of concrete and reassemble 300 tons of steel-metal structures. The design work took 9 months, and the updated station only produced its first power in March of 1947. This confirms that the destruction on the 19th of August, 41, was total in nature and completely disabled a key element of the industrial infrastructure for a period of over 5 years. A comparison of the orders from the Stavka of the Supreme High Command and the actual actions on the ground allows for the conclusion that there was a deep crisis in operational planning during the initial period of the war. Directive number 0019 of the 16th of August, 41, demanded that the line of the Dnieper River be held at any cost and forbade retreat without Stalin's personal permission. However, the technical impossibility of ensuring a stable defense due to a shortage of anti-tank weapons and the dominance of German aviation in the air forced mid-level commanders to make decisions to destroy infrastructure objects contrary to general strategic guidelines. The blowing up of the Dnieper was a consequence of this systemic contradiction between rigid orders to hold territories and the real capabilities of the troops on the ground. In conclusion of this study, it is necessary to emphasize that the verification of the events of August 41 requires abandoning the ideological cliches of both sides. The actions of military engineers Ipov and Shifrinets are assessed exclusively from a technical point of view, as the execution of a combat order under conditions of time and resource constraints. The operation demonstrated the high readiness of the engineering services of the People's Commissariat of Internal Affairs to carry out large-scale destruction, but revealed the complete unpreparedness of Combined Arms Headquarters to coordinate actions in crisis situations, which led to unjustified losses among personnel and the civilian population caught in the zone of the Dnieper water mass breakthrough. According to data from the archival funds of the Dnieprostroi Construction Department, the total material losses from the destruction of the hydroelectric complex, including the cost of destroyed equipment, flooded buildings, and lost electricity, amounted, as of 1941, to over 400 million Soviet rubles. This figure is comparable to the budget for deploying several new mechanized corps. Thus, the price of saving the front on this sector proved to be critically high, both in financial, economic, and demographic terms. A historical analysis of this event allows for a detailed reconstruction of the decision-making mechanisms during critical periods of the Great Patriotic War, when maintaining the Army's combat capability became a priority, surpassing any humanitarian and economic considerations of the country's leadership.